Pentti Linkola is a Finnish ecologist who is often called a radical ecologist because of some of his views around the environment and the negative effects of the relatively recent human population growth explosion. The point of this video is not to examine his environmental views, which, while interesting and worthy of mention, is not a topic I have deep knowledge in. So, I would not feel comfortable pontificating on them. But his general politics and philosophy is a subject I am very comfortable with, so that's why we'll be digging into those aspects of his book. All quotes used in this video are taken from Can Life Prevail?, which is a collection of Linkola works compiled in one book.
It is somewhat peculiar that so few thinkers have questioned the philosophical foundations of our culture. These people refuse to acknowledge that the world has not gone to ruin regardless of them, but because of them. The old saying that thinking is unavoidably dependent on values and very rarely genuinely free fits the case perfectly. It should be obvious, logically speaking, that the underlying values of society ought to be questioned when such a society is headed to its doom. What to do when a ship carrying 100 passengers has suddenly capsized and only one lifeboat is available for 10 people in the water? When the lifeboat is full, those who hate life will try to pull more people onto it, thus drowning everyone. Those who love and respect life will instead grab an axe and sever the hands clinging to the gunwales.
I love that lifeboat analogy. I use it all the time when I'm arguing against illegal immigration, when I'm arguing against this suicidal extreme mass empathy. I love it because it hits a chord, a common sense chord, that the churches, the pacifists, the liberals all wish to ignore. Sometimes enough is simply enough.
I find it almost inconceivable that despite all the contrary evidence, an intelligent individual might still have faith in man and the majority, and keep banging his head against the wall. Why won't such a person admit that the survival of man, when nature can take no more, is possible only when the discipline, prohibition, enforcement, and oppression meted out by another clear-sighted human prevents him from indulging in his destructive impulses and committing suicide? How can such a person justify democracy? Does he not see that unless all of Western culture grows humble and takes a deep bow of submission, it will assuredly ransack the whole earth and strip it to the bone, no matter how it might manage to change some chemicals into others or switch to alternative sources of energy?
And this is where you run into a problem with most people. They believe in this thing called freedom and liberty, but these things are abstract concepts with no real meaning, and taken to their logical extremes are nothing more than philosophical anarchy. And if anarchy is what you want, then I'm going to break your skull open with an axe handle, fuck your wife over your rotting corpse, and sell your kids to a slaver. Think you're going to stop me? Then what about the next guy, or the next guy? You have a small town that will band together to stop me? Then who will stop my roaming gang who is experienced in plundering and pillaging? You think praying to your God and being a pacifist is best in life? Well, we beg to differ.
Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. That is good.
This is not a dystopic anarchist future I'm talking about. It's a cycle of history. It's exactly how people figured out that united we are stronger. But most people who fear things like fascism because of concepts like freedom and liberty are not philosophical anarchists. They imagine some form of government, maybe varying on levels of interference or influence over their lives. But what these people fail to realize is there is no such thing as life without interference or influence. We did not need Darwin to tell us we are adaptive creatures. We've known this. It's how we survived and thrived through the ages. We adapt to our surrounding, for better or worse. Mankind has always been a combination of nature and nurture. Freedom and liberty, apart from anarchy, have always been whatever the lawmakers deem them to be. But yet people still cling to these abstract values whenever the rule of law is challenged, not fully knowing what specifically they can or cannot do anymore, just consumed with an irrational fear of having liberty or freedom stripped from them. They have Pavlovian-like reactions to defend their current master, who hides behind a curtain. These individualists who fear collective order often ignore the inconvenience of realizing you're going to be molded no matter what. The question is, who do you want working with that lump of clay that is you? Merchants and media bosses who care mainly for capital accumulation, or well thought out men who care mainly for the progress of a people and their surroundings?
All rights, even the most seemingly beautiful, women's rights, children's rights, rights for the disabled, only express one thing. Me, me, me. Pure selfishness has been given a new name, self-realization, now considered the noblest of all morals. Words like responsibility, duty, humility, self-sacrifice, nurturing, and care are always spat upon, if they still happen to be mentioned. For all their mistakes, even such recently buried ideologies as fascism and socialism, both of which emphasize communal values and contain restrictive norms, were on a higher ethical level. The same goes for Christianity. Only a while ago, the church spoke of fear of God, of humility, and the need to counter sin with virtue, altruism, and care for one's neighbor. Now this yes-man of an institution, hankering after earthly power, is promoting only forgiveness and mercy. Logically, the only option would be implementing a controlled pruning of both population and its material standard of living before chaos breaks loose.
What Linkola is saying here may sound a lot like the conspiracy theory about the elites of the world planning to wipe out a large amount of the population. While I've always seen the logic in such a plan, I have always not liked the fact that me and everybody I know would be on that list of people when it came time to cut the fat. But I think drastic choices like that can be avoided once we have a structured society. We have issues feeding the animals that feed us, let alone with issues of simply feeding ourselves.
Stupidity reaches a climax among those people who argue, without having learnt a thing from history or being able to read a single sign of our times, that man knows what is good for him. The people know. From this absurd assumption derives a suicidal form of government, parliamentary democracy, born among the tyrants of mankind, the West. Democracy and the public right to vote guarantee that no one other than the sycophants of the people will rise to power, and people never clamor for anything other than breads and circuses, regardless of the costs and consequences.
Oh, that cherished democracy. Have we gotten tired of it yet? Has the facade gotten old? I think it has. I think it has, and I think it's starting to show in this country. I mean, any political philosophy where two idiots' votes count more than one educated person's vote is obviously doomed for failure. And today, that is the case of the voters. On every side, they have a basic understanding of what they're voting for or why they're voting. But they can tell you, they can name you all the starting members of their favorite sports team. They can tell you the circumference of Kim Kardashian's ass. But if you'd ask them to detail why they vote for someone, or why they're not voting for someone, you would find their answers are very limited and usually regurgitated from whichever news channel they watch or get their information from.
Those who died in the attack were not simply humans. They were Americans. And not ordinary Americans either, but the priests and priestesses of the supreme god of this age, the dollar. The passengers of the domestic flights are not a valid sample of humanity either, but a wealthy, busy, environmentally damaging, and world-devouring portion of mankind. Two gods clashed against each other in New York, Allah and the dollar.
Now, what has not been highlighted in this video is Linkola's view of mankind and the solutions he believes we need to return to, like that of an agrarian culture, removing and limiting technology. His views on technology are similar to the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski. Linkola also believes in eugenic-influenced limited breeding among humans, something like what used to take place in China with the one-child policy. There is much to learn from a person like Linkola. He makes valid points, and he scares people because he has hard solutions. At times, I agree with his views, and even some of his solutions. And at other times, I disagree with both. Mostly, I think we disagree on our perception of man. I think Linkola has gone down the road that some hardcore nature lovers tend to go down, and that is putting man at the bottom of the list. While I could see, looking at modern man, why people could be subject to that kind of thought, I, being a lover of nature as well, still place man at the top of the list. I know man is just a step on the path to becoming God. This planet and the wonderful nature that fills it was once not here, and will one day not be here again, with or without man's help. But man, we hope to continue on, long after this planet has succumbed to time's cruel conclusion. In order to prolong the life of this planet and escape the eventual death of it, requires not culling the herd and going backwards in time, but rather by building a better man that is once again one with his land. Only through a structured, unified society can we hope to achieve a better man that is led by his higher self and not his lower self. Contempt for man will not solve our ecological problems, but an educated, unified society can. Even though I personally disagree with Linkola's grim view of man, I sympathize with, because I know it is real easy to hate your fellow man these days. It is harder to see the potential in them. But when you know how amazing that potential can be under a unified society, it drives you to guide man towards recognizing his higher self, rather than continuing to heap shit on him by classifying him as some sort of cancer on this earth. We will always be born a lump of clay, waiting to be molded. It is who will do the molding that will determine our worth and possibilities as a people. Our current molders have molded a shitty product. It's time for new molders.